Welcome to BEXY'S PC. I'm BEXY, and in this video I'm going to do a quick overview of my Windows 7 semi-retro gaming PC. Let's get started. So I'm going to do a quick walk around of the computer, and then I'll do some still images and explain why I put each of the components in there. So I did a bit of research into this compact Presario. It's a CQ3140AN, as the sticker on the side says. I looked up the serial number on Hewlett-Packard's website and found that the warranty started on June 19, 2010. Interesting to find that it was purchased in 2010, however, being that that is now over 8 years ago. Good on you, HP, for keeping these records so easily accessible online even after 8 years. Being that this is a Windows 7 build, it's good to see the machine was purchased in June 2010 because it still is one of the earlier Windows 7 machines, which was the entire purpose of this build. Obviously, this machine has been significantly upgraded from what the sticker on the side says and from its original configuration, which for back in 2010 wasn't too bad really. I mean, the graphics card was sort of lower level, being a 4350, but the processor is mid-range, and 2GB RAM and a 500GB hard drive wasn't too shabby back then. Later in the video, I'll show you how it runs some of the games from that era. So let's take a look at the individual parts, why I put them in there, and the dates that they were released. Let's take a look at the CPU that came in the system. It's an Athlon II x4 odd quad core 620 processor running at 2.6 GHz, which was released September 2009. Now this motherboard does support a Phenom 2 x4, however the second-hand prices are a little over the top for one that performs better than the Athlon II I already have. I do have in my possession a Phenom quad core 9750, however in performance benchmarks and from what I've seen, it actually performs slower than the Athlon II. So I've left the Athlon II in there. It's kind of mid-range for back then. It's 2.6 GHz and it runs most things fairly well for a processor of its day. So being that the processor was already in the system, it chose me more than I chose it. Onto the memory. Now the logical thing to do, of course, was to upgrade the memory. So the system originally had two ones in there, 2GB memory. So I've upgraded it to 4GB memory. It uses DDR2. Unfortunately, this motherboard only has 2 slots, even though you can see there's provision for 4 there, but cost cutting with OEMs, of course, happens all the time. So it's been upgraded to 4GB RAM. Will it run 8? I don't know. The specification says maximum of 4GB. However, I don't have the means to try 2 4GB DDR2 modules, as I don't have them in my possession. I will try it one day. That's about all for the memory. There isn't much to say except it was upgraded to 4GB and it's DDR2. So let's move on to the next item on our list. Just a quick note on the photographs and the computer. No, the photographs are not upside down. This is actually an inverted system in the case. So the whole system is flipped the other way around, with the graphics card fan sitting up the top and the processor down below. Okay, so onto the motherboard. The motherboard that comes with the PC is a Pegatron motherboard. It's an M2N 68-LA. The internal name of this motherboard was called a Nura 5L. This motherboard contains an AM2 Plus socket, which will support some AM3 CPUs. AM3 CPUs contain DDR2 and DDR3 memory controllers, so that's why you can use some of the AM3s on the older AM2 Plus motherboards. The motherboard also has 4 USB 2.0 ports on the back, as well as a header for 2 USB 2.0 ports on the front of the computer. It also contains a 10100 LAN built onto the motherboard. The board has one PCIe x16 port, 2 PCI Express x1 ports, and a PCI port, as well as 2 DDR2 DIMM slots. The motherboard contains a Geforce 6150 SE integrated graphics cards and an Enforce 430 chipset. The graphics card is disabled because I'm using a PCI Express card. Unfortunately, this motherboard has a very bare bones BIOS and will not allow me to do any overclocking whatsoever. That's all for the motherboard. Let's get on to the video card. So we have an NVIDIA Geforce GTX480 1.5GB. Now a lot of people say, why do you use a 480? Hot card, draws a lot of power, doesn't perform so well. Well, this was released closer to the date that the PC itself was purchased. So this was released on March 2010, so the PC was purchased in, June. That's why I selected this card, sort of. The other reason I selected this card is because my 500 series, my GTX480, is a WinFast with 3 fans and a 3GB model, and my 570 is actually a Asus DirectCU 2, and it takes 3 slots, and neither of those would fit, so we went with the 480. We also went with the 480. We went with Fermi over Tesla, or Tesla 2.0, GTX285, because, as most people would know, DirectX 11 was released October 2009, and Fermi can take advantage of Direct 11, unlike the GTX 285. Fermi 2, if I would like to update the machine to Windows 10, Fermi was also updated, I believe, this year to use DirectX 12, so it's a bit more versatile than using an older 285. That's why I chose the GTX 480. It gets hot, yes. Needed a better power supply, sure. But I have a reference model and it fit the case, and it's powerful enough to run most of the AAA games from 2009-2010. There's my reasoning for it. A lot of people don't like the 480. I happen to have 2 of them, so it was an easy decision to whack that in because it fit. It's a good DirectX 11 choice for back then. I unfortunately don't have any AMD cards from that era to use, so that's it for the video card. Moving on to the next item. Okay, so I was going to put in the PCI Express X-Fi Titanium card, but for some reason this system won't detect it. So I instead installed my X-Fi Fatality PCI card. Now, there really isn't too much point of installing a sound card in Windows 7, except for the fact that I like the clarity of the X-Fi cards versus the onboard sound, which this motherboard does have. However, Windows in Vista did remove the hardware layer, so you can no longer use EAX and things like that. Now, these cards come out in 2005, which is fairly old, but they were still selling the X-Fi Titanium, the home theatre version of the card with the gold plugs for home theatre PCs in 2010. So you could still get X-Fi cards in 2010. So I popped that in there, basically because I like the clarity, and that's about it really. Plus I like the little red Fatality light on it. It really just adds to the system. Okay, on to the last few items. So the power supply I put in there is a OCZ Fatality 750 watt power supply, which is definitely not from the 2009-2010 era. It was bought in about 2015, so I've had it for around 3 years. As for power supplies, I really don't stick with retro ones. It's not worth it, capacitors and that. I do have some good retro ones that I've checked, capacitors are all good, but generally speaking, a newer power supply is a better idea. And running the GTX 480, I threw in a reasonably high wattage power supply that I had spare. It suits the system fine. As for all the red lighting in the system that you see, that was accidental. The Fatality card has red lighting, the Fatality power supply has red lighting, the fan on the front of the system is red lit, and that was all coincidental when I put them in there, which is fine. It gives the system a bit more of a growly look, or the fact that it's got a GTX 480 look, I'm on fire, so it works out very nicely. Now I did add a fan up the front. There is actually some ventilation on the front panel, the sides have some vents, and it does flow through. There's also an 80mm fan on the back, so it definitely flows straight through, so that helps, especially with the 480 in there. So that's about it for the airflow, the fans and the power supply. The other thing I have is an SSD in there. Back in 2009-2010 you probably would have only had a 64GB, and if you're lucky, a 128GB drive. They were rather slow back then, they weren't as good as they are now. I had a hard drive in this because it was more era specific, but I noticed a lot of lagging in Windows 7, and once I changed over the SSD it was much better. I guess, being used to SSDs now, that's why, so I put that in there, and that's not really era correct either. Apart from that though, everything else in there is pretty well matching, and that's about it for those parts. So what I've got now is I've got a few videos of gameplay on this machine. The Fallout 3 I've just thrown in there, but it's 2008, it's a little bit earlier, but I would have been playing it 2009-2010 on a machine similar to this. I actually had a GTX 460, not a 480. The other games, however, are 2009-2010 releases, and they also have a fraps counter up in the corner, mostly run on high details. When you get to the demonstration of Fallout New Vegas, you'll notice that the frames do dip below 30 frames a second on high details, so it starts to struggle with that game there. Otherwise, the other games, 55, 60 frames a second, not too bad. We weren't striving as hard back then for the 60 frames a second marker, and most of our monitors were 60 frames. All of them are recorded in 1080. Unfortunately, my camera is focused on the screen because I do not yet have a capture card, which is something I've got to get next. The camera came before the capture card, that was more important. So unfortunately, I have got the camera pointed at the screen, but it doesn't look too bad. So apart from that, I'm going to leave you guys with the demos of the games. Subscribe if you want to see more videos like this or other content that my channel creates. We also have a link to our Patreon in the description below. Donate if you like. I also have a PO box in a town called Druin in Victoria. It's PO Box 840 if you ever want to send any old or retro hardware that you'd like to see on the channel. Thanks so much for watching. If you do press that subscribe button, click the notification button too so you'll catch our future videos, and hopefully our next video won't be as long apart from the last one. Leave you to it. Hope you enjoyed the demonstration, and I'll chat to you next time. I'm BEXY. Bye.
Another newcomer. Name's Lucas Sid. Mine?
station. When you use this device, your DNA profile is automatically identified and stored. Ah, at last a signal. You who are bringing this dead city to life, listen. My name, it is Tannenbaum. I know who you are, and I am in much need of your help. Please, find me in the Atlantic Express train station. Get out of here. This is Dr. Sophia La with a message for the people. Remember, you are not alone. Think of me not as leader, but as mother to the Rapture family. Must be something. No need.
She doesn't want you.
Watch out for that demolition officer. The hostiles have deployed breaching charges. If they get inside, Blaine is toast.
Get some! No! What have you done? What have you done? Had enough?